Hi YouTubers, my name is Kevin and you're watching The Royal We. Tonight's video is going to be an ad-lib quick video on the idea or concept of transference. The transference of personalities between a toxic individual and you. Now, many of you have felt as though the toxic individual and the abusive person you dealt with has literally crawled into your skin and taken over your identity. And meanwhile, you've been left with all the yuckiness. You've been accused of being toxic. You've been accused of being judgmental and selfish and ugly and nasty, and you have been made out to be the problem. Meanwhile, you're watching the real toxic, abusive person who has verbally assaulted you, verbally beaten you down. You're watching them seem as though they're living your life. Everybody's giving them praise. They're acting as though they're sweet or they're a good Christian or something, and it's just weird and it's bizarre. And the best way to describe this is some kind of transference of personality. Now, the Royal We does not subscribe to some kind of a curse of transference, not in any permanent sense. I do, however, believe, and I would validate you in that a process of transference of personalities does have on a temporary basis, as long as you are involved with a toxic, abusive person. But going no contact breaks that. Okay, and you build your own life separate from that. But I want to get into transference here so that we can have a better understanding of the process. The best way I could describe is by sharing with you a story that's a fictional written story called Dorian Gray. Maybe you've heard of this. The story of Dorian Gray involves a charming, young, good-looking person who happens to have a good friend at the beginning of the story who's a painter. And this painter is painting a portrait of Dorian Gray. And while this portrait's being painted, Dorian Gray is having a conversation with what seems to be the equivalent of the devil in the story, or the devil's advocate. And the devil's advocate is literally telling Dorian Gray that his youth is really all he has in life. And that ultimately, he's going to grow up and become old, and it's going to suck. And he's going to lose everything, and nobody's going to like him anymore. So he better just enjoy being young and filling his head with all of this nonsense, right? By the time the portrait is done, they all look at the portrait, and Dorian Gray instantly is just awestruck at the beauty of his own portrait. And he says, "It's amazing. It's beautiful. What an amazing painting." But then, suddenly, because of all the nonsense that the devil put into his head about growing older and becoming ugly and yada yada, suddenly Dorian Gray is filled with resentment towards the painting, and he tells his friend the painter, "I hate it. I resent it." And the reason is because suddenly he was stricken with jealousy. And he said, "It's not fair that this painting will live forever in this moment of beauty while I, Dorian Gray, have to become old and ugly and nobody's going to like me." And then at that moment he said, "I would give my soul to trade places with this portrait. I would give my soul for the portrait to become the thing that gets old and ages and nobody likes, while I, Dorian Gray, remain young and perfect forever." All right, it's basically what takes place. And of course, because it's a fictional story, some mysticism takes place. And sure enough, throughout the rest of the story, Dorian Gray does not age as an individual. Instead, the portrait does. Not only does the portrait age, but it gets all the ugliness and all the hideousness of every sin that Dorian Gray commits in life. So whatever Dorian Gray does, it doesn't matter. He stays young and beautiful. The painting turns into this hideous monstrosity that Dorian Gray has to hide from the public. Nobody can see this painting, okay? Now, by the end of the story, Dorian Gray has done so much bad things in his life that it catches up to him. And Dorian Gray runs and he looks at the image and he doesn't even recognize it. It's such a monstrous portrait. And so Dorian takes a knife and he goes to kill the portrait, and the story ends with Dorian Gray actually having killed himself. That's the story. Now, what we're getting an image of is this concept of transference. Now, this relates to you in a toxic situation almost perfectly. Let me explain. Now, the toxic individual, the abusive person in your life, charmed you And when they bring you into their realm and into their world, you are a reflection of them. They look at you as a pillar of beauty, right? You are what makes them look good. You are that portrait. You're a reflection back of them of how amazing they are, because you are the amazing one. You are so beautiful. I mean, look at you. You are beautiful. You're amazing. You are unbelievable. You are. You are that portrait. And initially, the toxic narcissist, the abusive person is like, wow, this reflects me. Why? Because you're with them. This reflects me. Amazing. But then, in a gradual process, doesn't take too long, suddenly, resentment and jealousy fills the heart of the toxic abusive person as they say, wait a minute, it's not fair. Why do you get to live your life being beautiful and amazing and making people like me feel good, while I have all throughout my life been known as a bad person, and I will continue to go on in my life being a bad person? And at that moment, out of resentment for you, I say, I hate you. I resent you. I would give my soul to trade places. I want to be the good one. I want to be the good one, and I want you to be the one that gets all the bad stuff in life. That's the moment of the transference, at least with the toxic, abusive person. So from that moment on, they resent you and they throw all of their ugliness onto you. They call you the toxic one. They call you the selfish one. They call you the ugly one. They demean you. They devalue you. Everything that they feel about themselves and everything they've done in life, they throw onto you. You become the portrait of them that ages. Meanwhile, they live the best part of them, which was the moment when they first met you, through your life. And they take on your personality. So the you that was captured with them, whatever you are, if you're a good Christian person, if you're just a loving, generous person, they take on that moment. And that's who they want to live out for the rest of their lives. Right? Now, this is the process. Now, I encourage you to check out the story of Dorian Gray. Read the book so you can get a better understanding. It is kind of wordy, or there's a movie out. You can watch the movie. Now, here's some things to understand about the transference process. The only way in which this worked, and the only way in which it worked in the story, is that Dorian Gray had the actual portrait, the painting, and he kept it, and he locked it up so nobody can see it. The same is true with you. The only way you can remain as the ugly portrait in a toxic relationship is if the toxic narcissist has you locked up somewhere where they want to keep you, where the public cannot see you. That's the only way. However, by going no contact, by breaking those chains, by leaving the situation, by moving on with your life, you are no longer their portrait. They either have to find another one or live their life being who they are, finding people who will call them out, will expose them, going back and forth in relationships like they always have. This is why transference doesn't really work. You see, transference only works so long as you are the portrait that is locked up in their closet. That's the only way transference works. However, if you remain, or if you find your way back to being an active person in society, in the community, an active person in your life, pursuing your dreams, pursuing your hobbies, living out a life of love, being yourself, that instantly breaks any transference. The toxic abusive person, they could pretend to be like you, but eventually it's going to crack, it's going to slip, it's going to fall. And you might be saying, but Kevin, I've seen them, it's been 3 years and I see them still acting like me, talking like me. It seems like they are living a better life than me. Listen, it's all a facade. We know that with narcissists. We know that because that's how they fooled you to begin with, to get into your life. Yeah, but Kevin, they're married now. They're married now and I'm not, and they have this great family. Listen, don't be envious of their new wife or their new husband or their kids' lives, because again, you know how they are. You know the real them. And they will find out. And just like at the end of the story of Dorian Gray went to destroy that portrait, but destroyed himself. So listen, ultimately, at the end of any transference story, it ends with the toxic, abusive person, the one who initiated a transference. It ends with them having to destroy themselves because at the end they realize everything was a lie, right? So the best I can tell you is don't live a lie. Live honestly, experience the pain of toxic relationships, experience the anger that you're feeling, and in time and through working with people like through the Royal We and working with others, begin to build your life to become an open and honest individual. Get yourself out of the toxic person's closet. Do not be their portrait anymore, even if this means you have to cut ties with them completely. It's the best thing that you can do. Now, I'd like to be part of your healing journey. You're welcome to contact me and schedule a one-on-one appointment. You can do this through www.jointheroyalwe.com. We can FaceTime. We can do telephone calls. And I also encourage you to join me every Monday night at 9 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time for Royal We Live Chat. The live chat is an opportunity for us to get to know each other as a community. Also, I do take phone calls during the live chat for free. I also encourage you to visit or join Royal We Fellowship, which is every Saturday morning at 9 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time once again. Royal We Fellowship is an opportunity for us to go through the ancient literature of the Bible, but from a healing perspective coming out of narcissistic abuse. This is all available for you. You can find the links down below, and I'll be back with more videos right here on the Royal We.